Hey guys, it's Miss Matthews again. Back at it live from my house. Again, I just wanted to say I miss you guys and that I will be doing social studies, fourth grade social studies for y'all. And today we're going to be doing primary and secondary sources. So first we're going to go through what each of them mean and then give you some examples. And then I have a little game that you could play by yourself or you could play with me. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much how today's video is going to go. Let's get started. So intro into primary sources. So let's start with primary sources. So what exactly is a primary source? So a primary source are things or objects that come or original records from the past recorded by people who were either involved in the event, witnessed the event, or knew persons involved with the event. So if you were actually at the place that it happened, or you saw it happen, or you knew somebody that saw it happen. So that is a primary source. It's basically firsthand information that you get. Primary sources, they can also be objects or artifacts or visual evidence. So like a picture of something. So if you took a picture, or maybe a fossil, or just an object that you get from the event that occurred. They also give you an idea about what people alive at that time saw or thought about an event. So like if you took a picture of something and you could see, oh, this is how they dressed, this is how they went to work, this is how the transportation, all that good stuff. So it can also be a object or an artifact or a picture of some sort. So keep in mind that primary sources reflect only one point of view. So it only reflects that person that saw it or that was there, or the person that they knew that was there. So it only has one point of view, and it may contain person's bias, or prejudged bias towards an event. So bias, that's one of our vocabulary words for today. Bias means you're swayed towards one end of the spectrum or another. So let's say that I like chocolate ice cream and somebody else doesn't like chocolate ice cream. So I'm going to be biased towards chocolate ice cream. I'm going to say, well, chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream in the world because it's my favorite. So that's my bias, that I like chocolate ice cream and I'm trying to persuade other people to like chocolate ice cream. But so primary sources sometimes will come with biases. Not all the time, but sometimes will come with biases. So you just have to remember that. But primary sources are usually better than secondary sources because they come from things or pictures. They come from people that were actually at the event. So it's definitely better than a secondary source. But here are some examples of primary sources. So we have newspapers that were written at the event. So like the war is over. You see this picture right here. So it was from that time period when the war was over. So they wrote about it. Interviews, you're face to face with somebody. You're asking them questions. Like if you had an interview with your grandmother and you were asking her about her life, she would be a primary source because she lived her life, right? So she would be a primary source, and an interview would be primary source. Then we have an autobiography. So an autobiography is a story or a script of something that was written by that person. So I have an autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin himself wrote a story about his life. He would be a primary source because he knows how he lived, he knows what he did, he knows the events that happened. So an autobiography was written by the person it's about. So if I wrote an autobiography, it would be about me. It'd be about Miss Matthews. So Miss Matthews' autobiography would be written by me. All right. Also, anytime you feel confused, or if you want to even go back, you can go back at the YouTube video, so you can pause it or rewind it for anything that I've said. But here are another few examples. We have diaries. Diaries have dates, and they're actually written by the person that it happened to. Like you might have heard of the Diary of Anne Frank. She was a Jew during the Holocaust time. She wrote a diary about her life living in the attic. She wrote day to day. Like that would be a primary source because she wrote it herself. Journals, the same thing. Records, also the same thing. It also, you know how Usually when we call your parents, we have a call record where it says who we called, what we say, or what we said, what was talked about, the time, how did we communicate, what did they answer. So it's kind of like a record of what happened. So that's also a primary source. Here's some more. Like I said earlier, primary sources can be pictures or drawings or sculptures, just a visual material of a painting that something happened. Like this painting right here, it could be it's a primary source because the painter drew him himself, saw the artwork, and drew it himself, him or herself. Right? Photographs, like I said, film, maps. Maps are a really good one. Maps are a really good primary source because it tells you where to go, like my north, south, east, and west cardinal direction kind of video. Again, these are all visual materials that are good primary sources. So again, primary sources are firsthand accounts. Firsthand, either they saw it themselves, they were there, or they know the person that was there. Again, songs and poems, they wrote them themselves. A good example. Again, artifacts are another one. Tools, ornaments, or objects, they were created at that time period. So like these pots, these pans and bowls, they were created at that time. So they're artifacts, or even fossils can be primary sources because they're proof that people lived back then and created this stuff. So great primary source. All right, so secondary sources. As you can guess, primary sources are first-hand accounts. Secondary sources are second-hand accounts. Very good. All right, so secondary sources are made at a later time. They include written information by historians or others after the event has taken place. So it's usually by people or historians, like they said, that write about the event that happened. So like if I write about something that happened last year, I would be a secondary source because I wasn't at the event. I didn't see what happened myself. I'm just hearing from the primary sources what happened about it and whatnot. So I would be a secondary source if I'm trying to write about something that happened 10 years ago because I wasn't there. Although they can be useful and reliable, they cannot reflect what people who lived at that time thought and felt about the event. So really emotions and how people actually lived or how they felt during that time can't be portrayed as well in secondary sources because again, they were not there. The people that wrote in secondary sources, they weren't not there at the event that happened. But they can represent a far more account of the event because they can include more than one point of view or more information that was unavailable at that time. So like I said earlier, primary sources can be kind of biased because there are only one point of view. But with secondary sources, you can get his point of view, her point of view, their point of view, everybody's point of view into one story or photograph, stuff like that. Also, pause again if you need to write any of that stuff down. If I'm going too fast, you can pause again. But here are some examples of secondary sources. There are a lot of secondary sources. We have textbooks. Textbooks is a really, really, really solid secondary source because the creator of the textbooks didn't live in 1800s. They didn't live in the 1600s. Like they didn't live back then. So they have to use research. They have to use their primary sources to come up with a textbook to put all of that stuff together. Biographies are kind of like the same as autobiography, but they're different. So biographies are things that are written about other people. So let's say I wanted to write a biography about Miss Wilson. That would be a biography because I'm writing it about somebody else. An autobiography would be me writing about Miss Matthews, myself, and then a biography would be me writing about somebody else. So like I could write a biography on Miss Wilson or Miss McQuarrie or Mr. Titus, something like that. So that's a biography. Newspapers sometimes can be a secondary source. Like I said earlier, it is a primary source, but it depends on who writes it. So like the newspaper report by someone who was not present at the event. So if they were present at the event, if they were there, they interviewed the people, they went and saw the actual accident or whatever, they are a primary source. If they didn't see any of that and they're reading off of other stuff or researching, then they're a secondary source. So they got it secondhand. So firsthand would be you see it yourself, secondhand, you're getting it from somebody else. Here's some more. Again, images, some images. So like graphs, you're recording information that you researched, graphs, charts, images created after the time period. So like this painting or this picture right here in the middle, this was not taken at the time of the actual event. It was created later in a painting. So that's the difference. So if somebody had a camera back then and took a picture, then that would be a primary source, but this is a secondary source. Same with the graph. They researched all of this stuff and then they collected it and put it in a graph. That's secondary sources. All right, so let's put it in kind of simpler terms. We're kind of thinking big, so let's kind of bring it back. So I have a story that I came up with. So let's say you're riding your bike with your brother and you fall off. So that is the event that happened. You fall off your bike. Your brother would be a primary source because he saw what happened. So you and your brother are riding down the hill and you fall off. This is actually a true story for me. I was riding down the hill and I flipped over my bike and I fell off and my knees were all bloody and I fell off. My brother was with me and actually no, it wasn't my brother, it was my sister. My sister was with me and she saw me fall off and she was the primary source. So she saw me fall off. Also, somebody else saw me fall off. My neighbor, she saw me fall off and she asked if I was okay. I was fine, little scrapes and whatnot, but I was fine. Those two people, the neighbor and my sister, were primary sources because they actually saw what happened. So we got home. I told my mom. I was like, Mom, I fell off my bike. My sister saw me there. Fell off my bike. Whatever. So we went to the doctor, got me checked out. My mom explaining to the doctor what happened or what the incident, but because I told my mom, me being a primary source because I was there, I told my mom told my doctor. My mom is a secondary source because she was not at the incident. My mom was at home when I fell off my bike. So my mom would be a secondary source because she heard the information secondhand. Okay? So she wasn't there to see it. She just knew that I fell off the bike. My neighbor and my sister saw me fall off my bike, so they're primary sources. Okay? My mom did not see me fall off the bike, so she was explaining to my doctor she was a secondhand account. She was a secondary source. Okay? But she can still tell what happened because I'm a primary source. My sister is a primary source. We were communicating. So she's still a valuable source or a reliable source because she came from a primary source. Okay, so primary is firsthand. So people that were actually at the event, and secondary is people that weren't at the event or they heard from people that were at the event. They weren't there and they were recorded at a later time. So secondhand and firsthand. Okay, so I have a little game. You can pause it. I'm going to talk through the game because, I'm playing by myself and that's no fun. But you can pause it and you can kind of discuss it with yourself or your parents, whoever's at home with you. But you can talk to your parents about which one you would rather choose. So would you rather, I know everybody knows how to play this game because we played it the first day of school, but the following slides contain examples of primary and secondary sources. Remember, primary is firsthand, so you saw it or secondary, you didn't see it, but you researched, but you didn't see it yourself, or it was recorded at a later date. See if you can classify each example as primary or secondary source and choose which one is better to get information from. Now, I kind of touched on this briefly, but primary sources are better than secondary sources because it's a first-hand account. Let's go back. It's a first-hand account. So let's go back to my bike story. I fell off my bike, right? My sister saw it. She is a better source to tell the story than my mom because my mom did not see me fall off the bike, right? So just keep that in mind. So primary sources are usually better, but sources are sources, but primary sources are way better than secondary sources. But let's play Would You Rather. All right. So you can either pause at this time or you can play with me. And I think that would be way more fun. But so report about Rosa Parks written by a 7th grader or Rosa Parks diary. So first let's classify. So a report about Rosa Parks written by a 7th grader. So I know that Rosa Parks was way before the 7th graders' time. 1960s era kind of thing. She rode the bus, wouldn't give up her seat for a white man, so she got kicked off the bus, arrested, all that good stuff. But I know the 7th grader was not at that event, and it was a report written about Rosa Parks. So I'm going to say that the report about Rosa Parks was written by a 7th grader is a secondary source. Rosa Parks' diary, though, was written by Rosa Parks, and she wrote her day-to-day stuff in there. She wrote what happened when she was in jail. She wrote about her civil rights involvement, but she wrote it herself. So I'm going to say that her diary is a primary source. But if I had to choose between the two, I would definitely pick the diary because she wrote all the stuff that happened. It might be a little biased, but she wrote everything that happened to her in her diary herself. The 7th grade report may not have all of those emotions and those details that she felt at that time. So I'm going to go with the diary. All right. So now we have a novel or an article about the novel. So again, this one's kind of tricky because they kind of are the same thing. So let's say we have a novel called The Spider. So The Spider is just written about the spider. So then we have an article about the spider, the novel called The Spider. So we have, let's think about this. So in a novel, it depends on if it's a fiction or nonfiction, and fiction is real life. So let's say it's a real book, something that actually happened. So let's say it's a primary source about something. Then we have an article about the novel. Actually, let's say they're both secondary sources. So they're both secondary sources, but which one would be better? The novel itself or the article about the novel? So the novel is the novel, it's the book. But the article about the novel is just, excuse me, the article about the novel might not pick up on everything that really happened in the novel. It might just give like a summary, something like that. So I think getting my stuff or my research from the novel would be better. Excuse me. All right, so we have an interview or a textbook. So I'm going to pause really fast, see if you can guess what it is before I explain it. All right, so let's talk through it. So an interview, you're face to face with somebody and you're talking about what happened at that time or what like that. Then we have a textbook is researched and put together. So I think an interview is a primary source because you get the information firsthand. and the textbook is a secondary source. So I would pick the interview over the textbook because it might have more emotional connection from somebody that saw it firsthand. Now, I'm not going to explain the last one. The last one, I'm just going to leave up to your imagination. I want to see what you know. So we have an autobiography and a biography. So remember what I said about autobiography or a biography. So an autobiography would be me writing about myself, and then a biography would be me writing about Miss Wilson, let's say. So I want you to guess which one would be better, which one's a primary source, and which one's a secondary source. Okay, that's the end of my presentation show, but I want to go back to this story. Let me go back to the beginning. Okay, so when you're using primary and secondary sources, you usually use them for when you're writing a book report, when you're writing a essay about something, when you're writing a paragraph, when you need to quote something, you use a primary or secondary source. So let's say I am writing a book report, or I'm writing a story, I'm writing something about Benjamin Franklin, right? So I want to use as many primary sources as I can, because I know Miss Matthews told me that primary sources are better than secondary sources. So if I'm writing, he was the inventor of electricity, he used the kite and the key to get electricity, I can quote from his autobiography. Remember, autobiographies are firsthand accounts because it's Ben Franklin writing about himself, writing about his life. So I can use a quote from his book or his autobiography to talk about in my book report or in my essay, right? I can't interview with him because, it was a long time ago. He's probably dead. But I can find newspapers from that time. That's definitely a good primary source. I can find if he had a journal or if he had some type of records, I can find that. And I can put it in my essay that I'm writing about Benjamin Franklin. If I had some pictures or maybe some sculptures of him, I can put that at the end of my essay. There's so many different sources. Now I can use a secondary source. Not getting you wrong. I can use a secondary source, but secondary sources again are kind of iffy because you don't know who wrote it and you don't know if they're credible or not. But primary sources are usually always better. But if I wanted to get some information from a textbook, textbooks usually do a lot of good research. So I could, quote something from a textbook about Benjamin Franklin. Again, biographies, I can get my stuff from. So like say Miss McQuarrie wrote a biography on Benjamin Franklin. I could quote from Miss McQuarrie's biography on Benjamin Franklin in my essay. Okay, so that's what you usually use secondary or primary sources for. Okay. Again, I could get a picture. I can make a graph of when he was alive or how many times he tried to get electricity from his kite and his key, stuff like that. But that's the end of my presentation. Again, I miss you all so much. I really hope you are having a great time watching our videos. I'll have another video up for you next week, two videos. Make sure you like and subscribe. Just kidding. Make sure you like and subscribe my videos, everybody's videos on the channel. Make sure you share our channel with all your friends. We're up to about 40 subscribers. So make sure y'all are keeping track of that and keeping track of your lessons, and hope you're still learning at home. And I miss you all so much. All right, I will see y'all later. Bye. Love y'all.